massive game in League One over the weekend was Wycombe-Wrexham. It was second against third. It was won by the team in third. They're now the team in second. Wrexham going 3 clear with this victory, a 1-0 win at Adams Park. Wycombe do have a game in hand, lest we forget, but this game was won by the left boot of Sam Smith, who volleyed home after a knockdown from a set piece. Or was it, George? You're telling me...
No, you were telling me. Don't throw this on me. Don't you?
You're telling me, right?
You told me via WhatsApp
that
this morning
a left-footed volley that clearly hits a defender trying to make a block and flies just inside the post at the far corner, that's not a shot on target, is it? That's an own goal. Controversial. Sorry, Sam. This was a game that was incredibly tight. Up until that point, Wrexham had like 3 shots in the game. Wycombe had a chance from a set piece not long before it. There'd also been an extended part of the game where the players were taken off the pitch due to a medical emergency in the stands. It was won by that sweet strike, deflected or otherwise, from Sam Smith. And Okonkwo did what he did in Wrexham's nets to see them over the line. It's a massive win.
A massive win, yeah, for sure. And also there was I think a very obvious, or in my mind, pretty clear penalty that should have been given to Wrexham, a 0-0, that wasn't awarded to them. Wycombe the better side in the first half, Wrexham continuing to do what they do. At the moment where they look to keep things pretty tight and look to kind of stay in the game before turning the screw in the second half. After that long delay, it was a game that looked, before the delay, like it was probably fizzling out into nothing, albeit Sam Smith did hit the post. He did really well, actually. Like, he had Taylor and Lowe kind of trying to block his way to a bouncing ball that was going through to the keeper, and he managed to kind of somehow weave his way between them and just get there in front of the keeper, but just poked it against the post. I've said it a few times last week, so I really like him. I mean, I think as a player, he's at a League One level. I mean, I'll be intrigued to see how he gets on the Championship, because we obviously saw a similar kind of profile of striker in Mark Harris thrive last season in League One and struggle to make the step up in the Championship. But I think Smith is a better footballer and a better finisher, but he still has that ridiculously scrappy attitude where he just will not leave defenders alone. But Caleb Taylor had a really good opportunity from a corner just after the restart from the break, which was saved by Okonkwo, and then Joe Lowe headed over the bar from kind of 4 yards out when he really should have done better. And then they went right up the other end and scored through Smith, that Smith volley, as you said. So a tight game where Wrexham come out on top. And I think they look to me at least to be in the best position now to go on. And we know that Wycombe have the game in hand, but between these sides, it feels like Wrexham are playing better at the moment. It feels like Wycombe are understandably still trying to kind of find their footing after the change of manager. That the departure of Matt Bloomfield just couldn't really have come at a worse time, I don't think, in terms of their promotion aspirations. They're still very much in it, and that's testament to how good a start they had. But this defeat is obviously a crushing blow to them. I think opens the door for Wrexham, who were pretty willing to walk through it.
I feel a bit for Mike Dodds, the Wycombe manager, because clearly one where it's going to be very easy to spin a narrative where he's taken over and the team have dropped out of the top 2, and that's always quite a difficult one to recover if you drop into the playoffs. Just in terms of the psychology of it. If they do drop into the playoffs, and of course they've got a game against Rotherham on Tuesday night away from home, but if they win, they will go back into second spot. But, they've lost a bit of their sparkle, there's no doubt, Wycombe as a whole. But I think they kind of already had before he was appointed. Even under Bloomfield, you look at the results, from December onwards, they started slowing down. They had a pretty poor December. That's when the draws started to poke their ugly head above the parapet and wins became draws. And then there was the interim period where they had some decent results when Sam Grace was in charge. And now Dodds, I'm making some excuses. At the same time, they've played Birmingham and Wrexham in the last 7 games, really tough opposition, and they've lost those games. They've also played 5 of the bottom 8 in that 7-game run, and they've only picked up 9 points from the 7 games overall. I just think it feels, from an outsider's point of view, like it's going to be hard to rouse things right now. But let's see how they go in Rotherham on Tuesday night. The league leaders, Birmingham, drew 1-1 at Northampton. It was one of their poorest performances of the season. Northampton made it really difficult for them and performed really well, particularly in the first half. The setup from Kevin Nolan was excellent, and it's another strong Northampton performance. I mean, they were gifted a goal albeit through their own solid high press, but what we call an Icarus concession on that podcast. George, when a team is trying to play out from the back and things just get a little bit too hot and the mistake ends in a goal, Icarus, of course, flying too close to the sun with his wings made of wax and falling to his death when they melted. Iwata passed the ball into his own net for Birmingham. Pretty funny to watch. And my main takeaway from that is how little that's happened to Birmingham this season, given how aggressively they build from the back, how few Icarus concessions they have suffered. An equaliser came from
good players,
Clara.
Better playing around the back than bad players, maybe.
Could be. You could be onto something there. An equaliser came when Clara crossed for Keshi Anderson. Quite like a goal, George, where a centre-back crosses for a winger to head home. Clara to Keshi and a 1-1 draw. And Birmingham only one win in their last 5 away games, only 2 in 7 since the turn of the year. So, they're on to challenge for a record points tally away from home. They have been struggling to win games, but credit to Northampton for this performance. And then we get to 4th place Charlton. They did the business at home to Wigan. They were highly likely to. They were expected to, and they did the business 2-0 up after, 35 minutes. Just putting too much pressure on a Wigan back line who, the setup was pretty defensive from Glenn Whelan, who was taking interim charge, Ryan Lowe having been appointed. Lowe then ended up in the dugout for this game, so I'm not sure whether he's going to have this one on his record or not. Matty Godden poaching 2 goals inside the box, 15 in all comps for him. And high fives all round, trips to Blue Water all round, all that sort of fun stuff from last week, because Charlton have picked up 42 points in 18 league games, more than anyone else in the league in that time. On Ryan Lowe and Wigan, George, they took a week or two to find the replacement for Sean Maloney. It's led to them to the door of Ryan Lowe. What do you make about this appointment for Wigan?
Yeah, really good appointment. We spoke when Maloney was sacked, kind of saying that maybe I felt like Wigan had kind of outgrown Maloney, possibly in terms of what they wanted to do, and whether or not other League One sides would be looking to appoint Sean Maloney. Well, I can guarantee that a lot of League One sides would like to appoint Ryan Lowe. I probably expected that his next job would be in the Championship. The fact they managed to bring him to the club when they are in a relatively lowly position in League One, I think says a lot about their ambition. And obviously, this would be a case, I'm sure, where they would have had to sell the project to Lowe rather than Lowe having to sell himself to them, given his stature within the game and his reputation. The Preston job went pretty well, I would say. It didn't end very well. I think, as we've spoken about a lot, feels like that Preston job is quite a difficult one to come out with much credit in, because there is a big disparity between budget and expectation and history. But the jobs he did at Bury and Argyle were obviously very, very strong. And, if Wigan want to build for next season and probably very much revolutionise their playing style to be way more front foot and way more aggressive and way more attacking with a decent budget, then Lowe is the person to do that. So, yes, I think it's a bit of a statement of intent that Wigan are kind of back on the up again. I'm excited to see what he does there. I can't imagine we'll see huge changes this season, but certainly looking to next season, it's got me interested. Yeah,
it feels like a good fit to me. I'm kind of interested about Wigan and their place in the League One food chain, because they're not a club that generates a ton of revenue in and of itself. They are a club that have made some pretty impressive sales in the last 12, 18 months or so, particularly Charlie Hughes and Tello Asgard. You'd expect that Sam Tickle might be sold for a decent fee at some point as well. So it'd be interesting to see what that does for them in terms of heft, because in terms of their signings and their squad building last season and this season, I don't feel like they've been left with a squad that I would expect to be challenging for anything particularly exciting. And therefore, I think that there's probably still quite a lot of work to do this summer to get themselves in a position where they could do. But then again, if Birmingham go up, if Wrexham go up, if one of Charlton, Stockport, Huddersfield and Wycombe go up, that's the top 6 at the moment, then, or Bolton just outside the playoffs, there'll be 3 pretty hefty teams for the level with decent budgets going up. The teams coming up from League Two, whoever they are, it's hard to imagine, well, they're not going to be anything like Stockport and Wrexham. I'm pretty confident of that. Certainly not in terms of their playing budget and how they're able to impact the transfer market. So a team like Wigan, and I think any of those teams, broadly kind of 11th and downwards, I think it could be an interesting summer where there could be opportunities for a big jump up from like mid-table, bottom half of the table to potentially playoff chasing or better if you really get it right. and with an appointment that we both like very much. I don't see why that can't be Wigan, but lots of work still to do. For Charlton, I'm just absolutely adamant that they're in an automatic promotion battle. We're going to go through this in more depth on our run-in analysis podcast next Monday. But, I've said it about Stockport a couple of weeks ago. They've got, after beating Bolton on Saturday, 27 points from their last 12 games. I've just said Charlton have got 42 in their last 18. These two are massively in it, George, and the Stockport win at Bolton just solidifies that for me.
Yeah, it does. I think the significance of this win for both Stockport and Bolton is huge. Again, really tight game. A game where Stockport had the best early chances. Andreasen with a really good opportunity after 50 minutes or so that he couldn't take. Bolton came into the game more in the second half. Crawley, who hasn't had a great season back in goal for Stockport, made a couple of big saves. But then one moment of real quality in the game won it with Tanto Alafe, who had a spell last season where he looked pretty much unplayable. He's one of those players who can, in moments, look so impressive. And here, picking up the ball on the left-hand side, driving in field, and then finishing into the far right corner to score the solitary goal of the game.
Was that not Louis Barry? It looked a lot like a Louis Barry goal.
Yeah, albeit I think Barry's finish would have flown into the top right rather than kind of being like bunted into the bottom right-hand corner. Bolton had a few opportunities. It should be said as well, Bolton will feel like they should have had a penalty in the first half with Aaron Collins down the left-hand side, seemingly kind of tugged back as he made his way down the byline. And Collins had the best chance.
And the classic Kyle Noyle, booked after 6 minutes, makes a number of fouls in the first half, not punished with a second yellow, subbed off at half-time.
Hooked. Collins had a good chance a couple of minutes ago, which, again, Adai was equal to. So it was by no means a poor performance from Bolton, but for Stockport, up against a side who've been scoring for fun, to keep a clean sheet, to get the goal. Again, it's a marker of their quality. Yeah, and I'm totally in agreement with you. I think this battle, speak about Wycombe, Wrexham earlier, they're still obviously the two most likely. They're both, I would say, not playing well enough. You can be really confident that they continue posting. If you were to have a little mini league between now and the end of the season of Stockport, Charlton, Wrexham and Wycombe, you'd probably have Charlton and Stockport as the two favourites in that mini league, wouldn't you? So they're there to be shot out for sure.
So FOTMob Corner focused on Bolton last week. Can't help but notice they lost against Bristol Rovers and then here at home to Stockport County. And also,
what we
talked about how Steven Schumacher, one of the things that he'd been doing that fans were loving was making really proactive changes. But here he came up against like the final boss level of proactive changes in League One, where Challenger had made all 5 subs before Schumacher made a single one. Triple sub at half-time, Toure, Wootton, Connolly on for Anderson, Rydell, Noyle. Then Fevrier and Moxon on for Camps and Norwood at 66, 67. Then Bolton make their subs 2 minutes later, but Alafe wins the game 72nd minute, and Stockport have got, half their outfielders have changed to that point. So that's the level you've got to get to, Stephen. Huddersfield won 5-1 against Crawley, which for a team that had failed to score in their last 5 home league games, for a team who were feeling fresh and excited to have John Worthington at the helm, or at least a fan base fresh and excited to have John Worthington at the helm. Such a popular figure within the club, such a popular figure when he was a player and now as academy manager and interim manager, to score 5 goals, to score 4 in the first half. It's pretty perfect. It was the perfect opposition for that because Crawley, I'm afraid, are a shambles defensively. And Huddersfield made the most of it. Joe Taylor is back from injury now. He's been managed back to fitness. This is only his 3rd start since joining Huddersfield in January and his 2nd goal. But Marshall played well. Ruskin, who they signed in January, he stood out as well in a really attacking left-sided role. And they won this so comfortably. Crawley are as good as down. If you look back at their season, there was a period where we were convinced that they had decent numbers, that particularly going forward, they looked like the best of the bottom sides. And maybe that could be, they could fire themselves to safety with that. But realistically, it's never looked like that in terms of results. They quite clearly lost a bit of their way in December and they just haven't been able to get it back. Now, I think this is exacerbated by growing and continued and growing off-field issues between the fans and the ownership. They're going at each other once again. It's just a club where it's such a sad thing to say because last season was one of the great miracle promotions that we've covered. But there's no real sense of spirit within the club because of the situation off the pitch, because of the high turnover of players over the summer, because Scott Lindsay left as well. Most of the players are in their first season with the club. All the playoff heroes have gone pretty much. So it's hard to build that, connection with the fans, but also just a squad personality and resilience. They clearly don't have this. They've conceded 43 goals in 19 league games. They've conceded 4 or more 7 times in that stretch, and it's not been nearly good enough. Huddersfield just made hay in this one and won very, very comfortably. Reading just outside the playoffs and still just out of reach for them because they dropped points in another home game, a 1-1 draw to Stevenage. The score sheet, George, looks like Trafalgar Square. There's just Pidge everywhere. Pidge own goal, Pidge goal. 2 amazing crosses, one from Savage that Pierre Gianni couldn't get out of the way of and scored an own goal to put Reading ahead. And then amazing cross from Kemp, somehow digging it out from the byline. And Pierre Gianni with a magnificent header to cancel out his own OG. So Reading, 10 unbeaten, really impressive. But they must be ruining recent home draws to Exeter and Stevenage because if one of those ends up as a win, certainly if both of them do, they are in and around the playoff places instead. Still just out of reach at the moment. Lincoln scored 5, just like Huddersfield, George, against Bristol Rovers. 5-0.
So, did you watch X Factor back in the day?
I tried not to.
Did you watch X Factor back in the day? Don't, it's not cool or you don't have to worry. Did you watch it? Okay. So, there was these 2 Irish twins back in the day called Jedward, right? Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Bristol Rovers' young goalkeeper is called Jed Ward. And having heard this kind of mentioned in passing, I hadn't seen it written down until this weekend, and I just can't believe his name is Jedward. It is just and also he's like 21, so he'd have been like a terrible age to be called Jedward. Surely he'd have been like 9-10 years old when Jedward was a thing.
Oh my god! What hairstyles he got?
I can't remember. I mean, it's just there was a documentary about Jedward after the X Factor called Jedward Let It Loose, and I've been trying all morning to work out what Jed Ward's documentary would be. And off the back of this result against Lincoln, maybe just be Let's Lose, because that's exactly what they did, 5-0 to Lincoln. He wasn't really at fault for any of them, you have to say, but Lincoln were in just imperious form. This is a Bristol Rovers side who came there off the back of really impressive 3-2 win. Maybe it was a case where they kind of thought after that win against Bolton that it was kind of job done, but they weren't in this game at all. Absolutely ridiculous how one-sided this was. Jovan Makama was the hero here, scoring a hat-trick off the right-hand side. A young player, 21 years old, came through the Lincoln Academy, having been released by Derby as a kid, looking really impressive. I think that's 5 goals in his last four appearances. Someone who is very quickly making a name for himself at a League One level. Tom Bayless scored a corner, direct from a corner, pick at 2-0. James Collins scored a really nice finish into the top left-hand corner. Someone who, unlike Makama, is kind of going the other way in terms of his career, but his goal-scoring exploits we only know too well. And we haven't seen this enough from Skabala's Lincoln. They've been a bit of a disappointment this season. But this was as one-sided a game as you're really going to see. 23 shots to 3, 11 shots on target from Lincoln. Just relentless wave after wave of attack. And, given what happened, as we'll talk about in a second, at Shrewsbury, a 7-goal swing in terms of goal difference between Bristol Rovers and Burton Albion. And given that they were, I think, level on goal difference before Saturday, I'm kind of calling this as being a 4-point swing that Burton have made up on Bristol Rovers, because now, if Burton Albion do get to Bristol Rovers, they'll absolutely have a better goal difference than them. So they, this is more. I think the significance of Bristol Rovers losing this game 5-0 is pretty massive.
Hey, let's go there now then. Let's go to the basement where I've called Crawley relegated. I'm calling Shrewsbury as good as. I'm calling Cambridge as well after their 1-0 defeat at home to Peterborough. Again, this is one where the gap between the two teams, had Cambridge won, could have been 7 points with 9 games to go. Instead, it's 13 points with 9 games to go. It means that Posh have now done the double over their rivals Cambridge, a 6-1 and a 1-0. And it was won by a nice free kick from Teo Eden. Great to see Poku back for Peterborough United. So many chances for Cambridge squandered, and Neil Harris absolutely fuming and seemingly somewhat accepting of their fate, and clearly wanting to be quite front-footed about turning things over in the summer to create a different-looking Cambridge side next season in League Two. Which means, George, with Burton having beaten Shrews 2-0, we are, and by we I mean sort of neutrals, if you like, EFL podcasters, looking at Burton and hoping that they can string together a few wins, because they're the only ones now that seemingly can make the relegation battle interesting, and they did the business at Shrews with a 2-0 win.
Yeah, they did, and they had to keep this interesting. The run of games after this is not nice. Stockport, Leyton, Orient, Wrexham, Huddersfield, the next 4 games, which is tough scenes for Burton. But we've seen them win against decent sides fairly recently. This was a win thanks to 2 corners. It was a 0-0 game up to relatively late in it, and then the 2 goals came. The first was another Darrell goal. He is very quickly adapting to life in League One, having been brought in from, I think it was Cove Rangers last summer, and taking some time to settle in.
He put 2 on a plate for Bennett as well, who spooned them both over the bar. I love, as you know, beat Burrell.
And then Van Kooten made the point safe with a tap-in after a bit of a scrappy melee off the back of the corner. Shrews, a few boos after a full time. Feels like that good feeling that Gareth Ainsworth brought into the club has very quickly dissipated. And yeah, I mean, they are as good as gone, I would say. It's just whether or not Ainsworth can get enough of a reaction between now and the end of the season to persuade everybody that he's the right man to take them out of League Two next season.
So this is said more out of hope than genuine belief. But with Burton, no, I tell you what, there is some belief here. With Burton, 6 points is a lot, and they've consistently been a good chunk of points away. The thing that makes it better is there are 7 teams within 6 and 10 points of them. So it's not necessarily the case that they have to just chase down the team above the relegation zone in Bristol Rovers, who are 6 points away. It could be Mansfield, who are 8 points away. It could be Rotherham. It could be Rotherham, who are 9 points above them. There's a large chunk of teams, more than half a dozen. And Burton only need to get above one of them. Not all of them, just one of them. And that gives me some hope for them, particularly because I had to rub my eyes looking at this earlier. Last 12 games, league table in League One. Burton Albion, 5th most points in the division in the last 12 games. That's not a 4-game lucky finishing streak.
12.
That's 12, George. That's more than a quarter of a season. So, with 8 games to go, what could it be? Let's see. I'm still up for it, I think. I think it's still alive.
It's annoying that they haven't got any of those teams.
The fixtures. You're going to go back to the fixtures. Completely fair enough.
The only 2 they've got Wigan and they've got Exeter, in fairness. So there are 2 teams there that are very much, if you're bringing that whole clump of teams into play, they have got opportunities there to take points off those 2. But Blackpool, generally the fixtures do look tough. Like final day as well away at Charlton. Maybe not ideal.
Horror show. Blackpool lost 2-1 at home to Orient. Orient's losing run ended. One of the great, I can't believe we've lost this, matches of the season, I think, for Blackpool. And you could argue, and I'm sure some Orient fans would argue, they were just due a win at Blackpool. They deserved a win at Blackpool because it's the first time they've beaten them in 96 years. And this isn't even one of those where it's like, oh yeah, they've only played 3 times. No, 18th visit since they last won at Blackpool, 1929. They lost 11, they've drawn 6. I was trying to work out if anyone could feasibly have been at both. But I think you could have been an 8-year-old in 1929, born in 1921. You'd be 104 now. And if you're 104, are you travelling from East London to Blackpool for us? I mean, maybe.
Maybe.
Look, who am I to rule any of that out? They smashed and grabbed it, really. Charlie Kelman at the double. Nice assists from Jaisimi and Ajay for his 2 goals. But Blackpool really dominated this game and should have scored more. Sonny Carey did get that goal, and he's in good form with 4 goals in his 3. But from Fletcher spooning over an open goal, having gone round the keeper, just not being able to control a half volley. Ennis missing from 5 yards out. Beasley 1-on-1, completely getting his touches all wrong. It was a poor performance in front of goal from Blackpool, but quite a fun overall performance, I would say. And I noticed, George, that Charlie Kelman, with 2 goals here, none of them from the spot, is now the leading non-penalty goal scorer in League One. Not Richard Koenig.
Is that right?
Not Jay Stansfield. Charlie Kelman. And some people call that the real golden boot. Me, I call it that. I call it that. That's what I call it. Good win for Orient, and a good win, well overdue as well, George, was Mansfield's at home to Barnsley by 2-1. This ended the largest or longest active winless run in the top 4 tiers, which had stretched to 13 games, but getting over the line here just about.
I really like the idea of a large winless run. Big scenes full time here. And it was one of those weird ones where watching it, Oshalaja scores really late and you see the absolute pandemonium amongst the home fans. And I was like, I mean, it's nice because it's a last minute winner and you've been on a losing run. But like, is it that important? And then you look at the league table and you're like, yes, it is, because it's kind of snuck up on me. That had Mansfield not picked up those points, they'd be level on points with Bristol Rovers. They'd be only above Bristol Rovers, Northampton and Peterborough due to goal difference. Yeah, so really significant goal for them in order to keep those teams between them and the drop zone. This result has been coming. I think their performances over the last 3 or 4 games have been much, much better than the results have been. Earlier on in this kind of run, they were playing really badly, and Nigel Clough seemed pretty desperate in terms of where they were. Kellen Vickers put them ahead. I think his first goal since joining the club on loan. I think that's right. Before Josh Benson. Mr.
Victor.
Josh Benson, formerly a huge part of Barnsley's side in the Championship, who's kind of just vanished. Been really in and out of the side, I assume due to injuries. When I saw that he had scored, I had to do a proper double take, assumed that he'd left the club a couple of years ago. But he was there to score.
Mr. Benson, somebody told me you'd left the club.
And then Oshalaja, who'd missed a decent opportunity early on in the game, causing some scenes. So a really big win for Mansfield.
I don't know what sort of impact Josh Benson had on you when he was part of the team before. Calling him a big part of the team. I'm not sure.
But as I said to you earlier, for some reason, I just have a real, I feel like I watched that Barnsley team so much.
The Championship team.
Yeah. I don't know why. Well, they must have been shown
14 starts, 11 off the bench. I mean,
there you go.
There you go. Good to have him
back.
I
was back. I think I was probably just betting him first goal scorer every week.
I mean, you want a blast from Barnsley Championship past? How about Conor Hourihane being in the dugout,
yes.
George?
Love this.
Sacking Darrell Clarke. It's an interesting one because I think Darrell Clarke is a really good manager for this level. I expected him to be a good appointment, and there were lots of times this season where I thought that he had a pretty good team playing for him. They've obviously dropped well away from the playoffs, and for a team that hasn't finished outside of the League One playoffs since the 2014-15 season, you can see why this has been considered unacceptable. Plenty of soul-searching for Barnsley to do over the summer then. Last but not least, Rotherham 1, Exeter 1 in the game that many were calling the battle for 14th. It was a 1-1 draw with James and Hartridge scoring.